let's say for this exercise, could you stay with me just for now and say that for this exercise, are you willing to take a chance and take a journey that all events are neutral? Yes. Just for this exercise. You can go back. Yes? So, with events in our life, we create what around the events of our lives? Politics. What? Chaos. Where does chaos come from? Ourselves. So, and our what? Our opinions. So I'm going to call those stories or opinions. And when I tell myself stories over and over and over and over again about...
Move that a little bit. There's a glare on the camera.
How about that?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Much better.
So when we create stories about the events in our lives, what happens?
We start believing it.
We start believing them. And we create what?
Facts.
We create belief systems around our stories. Because stories and belief systems don't just come from anywhere. They come from the stories we tell ourselves about the events in our life. So I dated a beautiful Italian man named Chris in high school. And he was the Italian guy. Yeah, he was nice looking, but he was mean. And when we broke up, he said to me, "You're fat, and jeans don't look good on you." And he was so mean to me. He actually cheated on me with my very good friend in high school. Her name's Melinda. I won't tell you her last name. I've forgiven her, by the way. But after that relation, I promised myself I would never allow anyone else to treat me like that again. Now, all these years later, another Mr. Tall, dark, and very handsome walks into my life. But because of the stories I created around Chris, I created belief systems about me and about him and about relationships. So when Mr. Tall, Dark, and Handsome, who had nothing to do with Chris, came into my life, where did all of those belief systems come from? The present, the future, or the past?
Past.
The past. Right? And what happens when I live in the past, it affects how I'm going to interact with very similar events in the future. And we talked about this before. So what happens? We're not living in the moment. And do I have the power to choose powerfully about the next Mr. Tall, Dark, and Handsome that comes into my life? No. And I am on auto react. And the stronger my story when I come into the program, that people, places, and things really suck, and I'm right about all of my beliefs, what happens? I go from my story, and my belief system gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and I go from my story and my belief system to auto-react. And this happens over and over and over again. And like recovery and the 12 steps of the program, right, we have a choice to either surrender or to be what? If we're not surrendering, what's another word for that? Fighting. Resisting. So I'm resisting, and I can maintain my recovery right here. I can be right all day long and not have the life that I say that I want in sobriety, but I can be right. What else? Why else do people stay in this area other than being right?
Comfortable. Fear.
Fear. I heard someone say comfortable.
Me, yeah.
What else?
causality of events versus what are your core values and your belief systems.
So your core values also will come from your
Events,
stories.
yeah. But that doesn't mean they're
Everything-
bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they can be.
They can be, but
They-
that's like some of your belief systems can also be quite good too.
And I think that's a very good question, and it's a very powerful distinction that, like in the program of recovery, where they say, what is the number one offender of alcoholics and addicts? Resentment. And what does the word resent actually mean?
To re-experience.
Re-experience it, re-feel it, refill it. And so if we're experiencing what we could call a low-level emotion, fear, anger, worry, concern, chances are the story around that event is not one that ultimately serves us in having a life that is happy, joyous, and free. And we actually have a choice. So would you rather live here and resist and be in the maintenance cycle, or would you be open to learning another way? Yes? So the same event comes up. Now a new Mr. Tall, Dark, and Handsome walks into my life. And instead of living in the story and the old belief system I have about relationships don't work, blah, 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 I could actually surrender and I could get off it. And how do we do that? When you're working with your sponsor in the program right now, so when you call your sponsor with something that's happened in your life that is an old thought process, and that old tape is playing over and over and over again, and she tells you to choose differently, yes? And potentially to surrender your point of view. So when we can recognize and be open, not right, there's a distinction. When we can be open to the idea that maybe this event is neutral and depends upon my opinion of it, I can be in the present moment and I can look at the event through fresh eyes, through sober eyes, through eyes that have gone through the 12 steps, especially steps 4 through 9. And what happens, has anyone here gone all the way through the steps at one point of their life? Molly, yes. So what happens when you go through the steps eventually? Do you see the world the way you did before?
No.
And one day at a time, as we go through the steps, where the freedom comes in, when we're in the present moment and we look at the event that's charged up and has us upset and wanting to be right about that person, place, or thing, all of a sudden, instead of automatically reacting, we can choose a new response. And it doesn't mean that the event is right or wrong. It means we choose to look at the event through a different perspective and what's possible. And we surrender, and what happens here that would never happen here? Objectivity, and through objectivity comes growth. And what's possible for you here as women that is not possible here?
A new, happy, joyous, free life.
Say it again.
A new, happy, joyous, and free life.
Happy, joyous, and free. And who's familiar with the 12 principles of the program? Right? We're learning them as we go. So is it possible that a woman who chooses to be honest is more likely